Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rebuild with Confidence Divorce Summit. I'm your host, Lisa Grace. The goal of this summit is to help individuals find hope and optimism during the midst of their divorce and beyond. Today, we have a special guest who will guide us through the principles of parting and provide valuable insights. But before we dive in, I'd like to share a personal reflection. Looking back at my own divorce, I remember entering it with fear and uncertainty. Like many of you, I had witnessed friends go through hard and devastating divorces, and I expected the same for me. Luckily, I discovered a different path through trial and error. I wish I had known the principles of parting found in the book Splitopia. And that's why I'm incredibly excited to have Wendy Paris, the author of Splitopia, joining us today. Before we dive in, let me tell you a little more about our guest. Wendy is a journalist and essayist whose work on marriage, relationship, and contemporary culture has graced the pages of the New York Times, Psychology Today, and Glamour, to name a few. Wendy holds a master's degree in creative writing from Columbia University and a master's degree in social work. Her expertise extends beyond divorce, as she has also written books about dating, weddings, conscious consumerism, and thriving at work. Additionally, Wendy offers book consulting, ghostwriting services, and divorce coaching. So without further ado, let's welcome Wendy. Welcome, Wendy.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
And so let's get into the topic of today. So tell us what inspired you to write your book called Splitopia, and how did you come up with that name?
I was talking about, my husband and I decided to do a trial separation, and we really thought that we could do it well. We thought we got along. Our son was 4. We got along about parenting, but we were not, I wanted a kind of an intimate relationship, and he wanted much more distance, and we could not, as a married couple, kind of come to an agreement there. But we weren't fighting about parenting, and we didn't want to not be friends. It wasn't like somebody cheated. I just thought maybe I could not be married to him. Like maybe this could be better. So when we talked about it with our friends, everybody almost across the board doubted that we would be able to have a decent divorce. They were sure that, somebody said, you're in the honeymoon phase of divorce now, it's going to get worse. Or my parents had gotten divorced when I was 5 and they didn't fight. In retrospect, my father wasn't around as much as I would like, something I became aware of as I was working on this book. But I grew up with the idea that my parents got divorced. It was fine. They were friendly. That there wasn't this acrimony. So, and my ex-husband, he didn't have any experience with divorce in his family, but he's very logical and very stoic. And he, also thought, well, divorce is difficult for 2 years. Let's get those 2 years out of the way now, sooner rather than later. He was very. So I wanted to know, why are people so sure that it's going to become terrible? Why are they so sure that we're not fighting now, we're going to start fighting then? Why are they so sure we're going to start, fighting over money? We were fighting a little bit over money. We didn't have enough, but why is it going to get worse? And so I started doing some investigating and discovered, I guess, 2 major things that were in the mind of my friends. And one was, well, I guess 3. One is they'd seen horrible divorces, like what you're talking about, right? Everybody has stories of bad divorce. But 2, a lot of those stories from the past come from a different era when women weren't working. And so they were so vulnerable, when there was a lot of judgment around divorce, when, I was the only kid with divorced parents in Farmington Hills, Michigan, in my neighborhood where I grew up. So it was very isolating for kids. There was judgment. Fathers were very often just kicked to the curb and they lost contact. So it was, bad for the fathers in that regard. And there, before no-fault divorce law, this is a legal thing, but before no-fault divorce law, which came online in the 70s, you had to go to court and basically say that your spouse had committed a felony or had abused you or had cheated on you, or you could not get divorced. So it was like a punishment for a crime. And that is completely not the situation today, but people still have that in their mind. So I would say that's the second reason. And then I guess the third reason is, we have a lot of, so I'm saying, sorry, that you've seen bad divorces. We're looking at the reality of a different time. And the third reason is there was some very flawed research showing about child's well-being after divorce. I discovered, and that is my dog. a study that has been, roundly dismissed by all researchers, that showed that children did really poorly in divorce, and another study where the researcher actually misread her numbers because she was so sure kids were going to do worse in divorce. And it's just, there's more kids do worse in divorce than in intact families, but there's more parents who are struggling get divorced. So there's other reasons. It's not the divorce. What research shows is that high conflict is really difficult for children, whether parents are married or divorced. It's this conflict. So those are the three reasons. And then I felt like, I'd written about marriage, I'd written about weddings, I'd written about relationships, but I hadn't written about divorce, and it had been with me my whole life. And so I wanted to share like my experience and have an opportunity to continue researching and let people know, I met this person on the plane who has a good divorce. Like I met this person at the Starbucks who has a good divorce. Here's how we're handling it, and give people hope, and role models for other ways to stop being married.
I'm just going to interject. If anyone wants to see Wendy more, they need Wendy Paris more. You have some great YouTubes that kind of tell that story, and your book tells that story. So it's very encouraging. And I'm getting a little off topic, but kids do as well as the parents do through divorce. So if the parents are doing well through divorce, I think it's a trickle down. So if the parents aren't doing good, I just really believe that the children and the parents can all work together to have a amicable divorce and have a good future that's good for everybody. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's very interesting that you say that. I guess I would agree in terms of if you can limit conflict with your spouse, that is so helpful for children. If you can protect them from hearing the details, like depending on what's age appropriate. So there's a lot in my book about child development, and you don't want to share with an 8-year-old that her father cheated on you. Like that's not, you want to protect that.
Right.
I can't remember the term in my book, but a psychologist was talking about this barrier that we want to protect our children. It's part of the struggle children are having today more broadly. They're seeing things on the news that are way over their head. It's too much violence, right? It's too much violence. It's too much instability, and children want to feel safe, and you want children to feel safe so they can explore. So I agree with you that if you're, in terms of the parent doing well, being able to remain in the role of a parent and not overshare details that are not necessary. I'm not saying lie. I'm just saying come up with a way of saying, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. Really acknowledge the sadness. Don't try to, if they're sad, brush it under the rug. I know it's difficult. I'm sorry that your father and I weren't able to get along. But then what I say is turn the focus to the child and how much is going to stay the same in the child's life, or what's positive. And when my son's dad moved out, I mean, this is a little silly, but he was 4. He was very, kids are very self-involved. And I was like, he's living above the fire station. You can go to the fire station anytime you want. And we made a calendar with like a dolphin stamp and a shark stamp to put which days he was going to be with his dad and which days he was going to be with his mom. He stayed at my house. He didn't sleep at his dad's in the very beginning because we thought, this is a little kid. It's too much. Because we were getting along, it was fine for my husband to come over, spend time with him. We just tried to keep it very like, you have a lovely life and we're going to maintain that for you. But at the same time, acknowledging if a child is struggling or, so that's what I'm saying, like, if you're doing well, it doesn't mean your children are doing well, right? If you're out dating, you're having a great time and they're really,
My doing well is the well-being of your family unit.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, because doing well truly comes from a foundational guidepost, which I'm kind of using yours, that you are doing well by your child, you're doing well by your family. And so if you're leading with that, that's the best course. Then adversarial trickles down. But I'm so glad you elaborated on that, because that's so true. Like, woohoo, I'm out there dating. No.
Right. And your child's like, now I live in this apartment. I loved my house. I hate having to meet. I hate this apartment. I had to change schools. These are not my friends. Like, I wish when my parents got divorced, there'd been a little more of a, yeah, let's make sure we can make a play date with your best friend who we just moved away from, instead of just, it's fine. It's all fine. Like, let's not talk about it.
Right. We're a lot more involved in our children, I
Right.
think, because of what we didn't have.
In the era, right?
Yeah, in
Parents.
the era and all that. So, touching on weddings, I loved your wedding planning analogy. Would you care to share that with the audience?
Yeah, I think that that one of the challenges is that divorce often just explodes, on you. Even if you've been unhappy, you hear so many stories where they're in couples counseling and then it turns out he'd been having an affair and then they're getting divorced, and you haven't done any planning. And so, in other situations that are life-changing, like getting married, that you have to plan in advance. People spend 6 months or a year planning a wedding, which is like a one-night event or maybe a weekend event, but they have a seating chart and they figure out the menu and who's going to get along with who and where are we going on our honeymoon. But with divorce, it can just erupt out of a cannon, and suddenly you're supposed to live alone and you're supposed to move and you're supposed to manage your finances. So I have one of my 7 principles of parting is build a toolkit for the transition. And so this is a way of, saying this is a major, major life transition with a whole lot of emotions that, you go into it with, that come up through it, and that you want to also have a practical, mindset. Who's going to be your emergency contact? How are you going to handle your emotional flare-ups? Do you have a sort of go-to routine for calming yourself down, like mindfulness or going to the gym or, meeting friends? Building a routine in your home. My sister bought me a Keurig after my husband moved out, because my bedroom was on the 2nd floor and I just could not get up, go downstairs, make the coffee before having a cup of coffee. No way. So I could just kind of lean over and push the button and, things like that, which seems silly, but this is how we live our day-to-day lives. And so taking that seriously and setting up a structure for yourself is
I
really.
love it. I think that tip right there, having a Keurig next to your bed, is that's a life. That might be the game changer to a healthy divorce. So you came up with 7 principles of parting. I think you've touched on them just a little bit right there. Could you explain these guideposts? And I'll start with one, and then you can elaborate. Commit to self-compassion. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, self-compassion it's an idea that comes from Buddhism and has been kind of now codified into like Western thinking. And one of the things that happens in divorce is people have a lot of judgment, and often when we're victimized, we feel we feel self-judgment, and whereas self-compassion has been shown in studies to really correlate with resilience after divorce. And so self-compassion, they talk about it as like a 3-part quality. It's viewing yourself with understanding and forgiveness, rather than, even if you did something wrong, even if you caused it. I was very critical, to be able to say, well, I'm sorry that I was critical. That was something, I understand where that was coming from, to not have that harsh judgment, to see yourself as part of the human experience. Like, you're not the only person who's ever been divorced. This is challenge is part of the human experience. And practicing mindfulness is the third part. So just having a way of being in the moment, kind of stepping out of the turmoil you might be feeling. And so these are all part of self-compassion.
Thank you. I'm going to just pause and say thank you again for writing a book like this, because I know that when I was in the bookstore looking for books in divorce in 2008, 2009, there weren't books like this. They were all legal focused. They weren't. So there's 2 parts of divorce. There's the business of divorce and there's the emotions of divorce. And you are touching on practicalities for the emotional side, which lasts so much longer.
Yeah. I sent my ex-husband this nasty text, like, I don't know, 2 months ago. We split up 10 years ago. And I just want, I was thinking about it, getting ready for this call, because I sent this text I had gotten triggered. I sent this text, and then I looked at it and I was like, whoa, that was like a relationship ending text. And but he just responded and said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, and I'll try harder or something. I was totally out of line. But I think that because I've spent these 10 years really working on that relationship and trying to, follow these principles in my book and be fair. We'll talk about the principles, but, commit to self-compassion, that when I did then kind of act out, we had built a foundation, of trust as former spouses and co-parents. And so I had that to rely on.
Absolutely. Instead of having it just go into this spiral of anger, you have developed the foundation of, I might say something, but I'm gonna be quick to forgive.
Yeah. Or apologize,
Yeah, yep. So here, maybe this is take ownership of the future and the past.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so this is a really important point. We often feel victimized. We feel wronged. I haven't gotten remarried. If I look at what happened to me, I mean, maybe I will, but I haven't yet. And so I can feel like a victim. So, or if your spouse cheated on you, or if, any number of things can happen. If you can see yourself as having agency in your life. And so in these situations, even where someone's cheated, a number of people said to me, I didn't cause that cheating, but I was involved in the marriage. I was a contributor to the breakdown of the marriage, and I take ownership of that. It sounds counterintuitive, but it is so important in terms of you then having the energy to say, okay, I'm in charge here. I'm in charge of my life. What do I want to do next? I can make it happen.
Absolutely. When we take even 1% responsibility for our part, we're making a huge step forward in progress. So
Yeah.
don't confuse filing with closure.
I mean, that's just to the point you made, that the legal part can be dispensed with. It can be quick, and but the emotional part, you can't, you can't just sign on the line at the lawyer's office and then you're done. It's, you've got your own childhood, your own history, your own future in front of you. So sometimes people will rush to make it legal, which leads them to this downward spiral of hiring a very adversarial lawyer, while they're scared, listening to friends who say, oh, he's going to take you for all you're worth. I have a friend doing this right now. They have plenty of money. And suddenly it's like, he's going to take me for, where is this coming from? It's coming from the fear of divorce. So if you feel like, well, I got to get the paperwork over with and then I'll be through, that's where this is coming from. My concern about people going the adversarial route instead of using a mediator, or attempting to use a mediator if at all possible, we didn't even use a mediator. We just did it ourselves, just trying to calm down and then come to you're detangling your life, come to that from a place of confidence and calmness.
I agree. You have a chapter, it's like, and I'm not going to say it exactly, like, don't buy your attorney the cottage.
And then don't buy your attorney a country house, or like a country
house. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I met somebody who spent $200,000 fighting over $200,000. So what they did with it is they gave it to the lawyer.
Right. Someone said to me when I was going the kind of the beginning stages of my divorce, whose child do you want to put through college, your own or the attorney's?
Right.
And I went, oh, okay.
Right.
That really kind of made an impact on me, and I'm glad that was said in my presence. So build a toolkit for transition.
So that we just talked about a little bit, acknowledging that there are, real and practical changes, and that the more you can prepare for them, the calmer you'll be. So I identified 3 things, like who's going to be your emergency contact. I still have my ex-husband. He probably has his girlfriend, but figuring that out, figuring out how you're going to deal with your own emotions, how you're going to calm yourself down. And then these routines like the Keurig or carpooling, or a neighbor here and I have, when I first moved here to LA, started making dinner for each other's families, a single dad, a widow of 2 boys, and he brought over pizza, or, he called me and said, "There's a 2 for 1. Do you want me to get you one?" And, I did that with a girlfriend in Hoboken, where we used to live. So things like that, just coming up with plans. There's a lot of like fun plans that you can come up with.
100%. And it doesn't mean that we can't give. Yeah, I love it, because friends and family aren't limited to blood.
Right.
And it's just really cool who we get to meet and who we get to interact with. So combat anger with empathy.
Yeah, and this is a hard thing to do, but it's so powerful. Um, when we see things only from our perspective, he got a girlfriend right away. We can have a lot of anger. When we try to see it from their perspective, and we can, well, he was really brokenhearted. He was really feeling insecure. He was really alone. It's such a faster way of being able to let go of your own anger. And your own anger is very toxic, right? And it's distracting. And you put all this energy in your anger that you could be using to do so many other things. So any way to get past that anger, I think, is helpful. And empathy, research shows, and I've certainly had this experience myself, empathy can be the fastest way to kind of let go of this position that can feel very, locked into your position.
Thank you for that. Resist the urge to compare.
This is so hard to do with like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, but this is both. You don't want to look at your situation and compare it to the Facebook post of somebody who seems to be doing better, right? It's this thing coaches say, compare and despair. You don't want to do that. But you also don't want to look at somebody who's really struggling in divorce and say, well, that's going to happen to me, or whose child is struggling and say, well, it's because of the divorce, that's going to happen to my child. So, we have to walk this balance of getting inspiration and, noting something to be, wary of or to be careful of, but not losing track that, this is our lives, this is our story. We're in charge here.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And number 7, create positive moments.
So there's all this research that shows that it takes, something like 3 positive moments to counteract the negative feeling of a bad moment. So it's a silly thing, but it's like somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're really mad. It takes like a beautiful sunset and a neighbor bringing you pizza and the dog wagging his tail to sort of counteract the negative. They say that negative experiences are more potent and gripping. There's other traditions that say positive energy is much more powerful than negative, but this, just in terms of psychology, this is something that psychologists have found. So they also have discovered that you can just put positive moments in your life, and that they tip the balance of your day, of your day's sort of score sheet of how was your day. If you put positive moments in your day, even if something really bad happened, like you got, a horrible conversation with your ex on the phone, or like a horrible letter from the lawyer. If you also had like a great drink with a friend, or you went dancing, or you played racquetball, or you saw a beautiful sunset, those things also happened in your day. So your overall experience can wind up being positive. And what I like about this is, we live in such a psychotherapeutic moment. And so we think we just got to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about our problems. And there's a lot of research that shows you could also just put your problem aside and go do something that is not a problem, but a joy. And that in itself is supportive and generative and like healthy.
I love that, because really kind of it's a choice to be happy. And it's a choice to, to not. And we need all the positive moments, especially during divorce. It might be hard, but if we're disciplined at it. And I really like your formula, 3 to 1. That's really, I like that a lot. So finally, I love the fractured vase metaphor. And the turnaround of picking up beautiful pieces and making use of them. Would you like to, and making something new, would you like to elaborate on that? Because it's such a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah. This is not my idea. This comes from the field of post-traumatic growth. We've heard about post-traumatic stress, but there's also a lot of research showing that many people experience real growth after a trauma, like spiritual growth or psychological growth, the growth in friendships, a deepening in relationships. And so there's a book I love called What Doesn't Kill Us, that's about
you mentioned that.
post-traumatic growth. And he talks about this idea that you have this beautiful vase on your shelf. Like, say this is like your life. It's this beautiful vase. And the vase gets knocked over and it shatters into, 100 pieces. So what do you do? And say this is your life, your beautiful home life, your beautiful family, it gets knocked over, it shatters. If you just sweep up all the pieces and throw it in the trash and pretend that vase never existed, that can leave you feeling like disconnected from your own life and kind of alienated and negative. If you try to piece it back together, and it's all these, you're gonna have like cracks and beads of glue. But if instead you say, well, I'm gonna take out the large pieces, the most beautiful pieces, or like in your own life, what I really loved about my marriage, what I really loved about that era in my life, and then rebuild a mosaic of those pieces. So it's like a new and beautiful thing that is using what you've done, is staying connected to your past, but in a new way. So I have to say in my own life, when I moved from Hoboken, from New York to LA with my ex-husband a couple years after we split up to raise our son out here. And I still had the bedspread from when we were married. And at some point I thought, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, I need to move on, right? I should not have this bedspread. But I loved, being married in many ways, and we having a baby in this house. And I didn't want to and I'd chosen that bedspread. So I wound up getting it made into a couple pillows.
Oh.
So I mean, he threw it out, right? He just went, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to, so I have these pillows. So because that time in my life was also my time and it mattered to me. And I mean, not everybody would want to do that, but that's like a very literal kind of example of this fractured vase metaphor.
I have some of those too from my first marriage. I have, I had side by side my husband as a child and my daughter as a child. You see them looking like each other.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Because
And
she's
so-
part of him.
Right. And then I had my picture of a child and my daughter as a child. And so I had those two together. And that's our daughter. And so I don't have them up front and center, but I still have them. And they're a beautiful part of my family that I cherish. And so regardless of the divorce, that's human creation right there. And two people that once loved each other, what we did. And I love that my daughter looks like her father, and I love that she looks like me, so it's the beautiful part. So that mosaic, I think that's really, really poignant.
Yeah, I had an experience. I had a serious boyfriend. Sorry, here's my dog. I had a serious boyfriend before I met my husband. And when we broke up, we stopped being friends. And I felt like I had lost contact with those 6 years that we were together. I didn't have anybody to talk about it with. And I was so keenly aware of this when my husband moved out that we were together for 12 years. And I didn't feel like I had enough years to throw out those 12, completely erase them from my mind. So, maybe I've overdone it, but I've really wanted to, talk about when we lived in the country together with my son. And I've really, tried to keep that because they were key years of mine.
Well, when we get to a point, I believe that you and I are at, we let go of the pain and we keep the fond memories, and
Yeah.
that's what it's about. I read in your bio at the tail end that you're a divorce coach. Could you tell our audience a little bit more about that and how they might reach you for coaching?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I worked with a divorce coach when I was going through my divorce. I had a book contract, so I had, a creative project, which is so helpful and is something as a divorce coach I recommend to a lot of people. It's helpful in loss and grief in general. I had a book project, but I also got a divorce coach because there were so many different pieces and I needed somebody to keep track and to help me move forward. And she's in the book. I quote her a lot in this book. And I went to a therapist and I joined a group therapy at some point. Like I definitely needed some support. I did a master's degree in social work recently and focused on strengths-based interventions. So these can be used in therapy and like a kind of a short-term therapeutic approach, which is very popular in social work. And these can be used in coaching too. So it's really in divorce. as a divorce coach, it's finding out what are the issues that are in front of you, looking at my 7 principles of parting, and what of those could be useful to you, and then really helping you reconnect with your strengths and times when you've relied on your strengths to overcome obstacles in the past, or to create a positive future, and then how you can harness those same strengths now to get through this. Which is that's like a fundamental of a lot of these strengths-based forms of therapy that I think are great.
I love that. I love that. Wendy, what other books have you written?
Oh, and let me say, sorry, that if people want to reach me, you have my email. It's
And I'm going to post your website.
Yeah, perfect.
And there's a contact form on there. I know that that's true. So
yeah,
okay.
It's wendyparis.com. So I before this, I wrote a book. I co-wrote a book with a friend about wedding quotes about love and marriage, and how you can use those to personalize your wedding.
I bought that.
Called Words for the Wedding. Are you getting married again? Is that?
No, I am going to become a wedding officiant.
Wonderful. So this book is perfect. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I have been in the wedding business my life.
Okay.
On the coordinating side, and I'd like to go into the officiant side. So I thought,
that's great.
Buy this from someone I know.
That's great. Thank you. I wrote for Brides magazine for a bunch of years when I lived in New York, and I covered the Poconos. I did a lot of honeymoon travel. I went to the Poconos couples only resort. I covered that for 2 years straight. So I don't know if you know the Poconos, but
I've heard of that. Have I ever been there? No.
Yes. Yeah, I have been there many times. I wrote a book on dating called Happily Ever After, which is dating tips from fairy tales. And then in the last handful of years after Splitopia came out, I wound up helping other people with their books and their book projects. So that's what I've done for the last, say 5 years. So I wrote a book called With Somebody Else about her experience starting a company to connect artisans in the developing world with consumers here. And that's called Buy the Change You Want to See. I love that book. The woman is named Jane Mossbacker Morris, whose story it is. I ghost wrote a book called Big Kibble about the pet food industry. And I wrote a book called Don't Quit Your Day Job with a tech executive named Eliza Knox about thriving within organizations. So that's what I've been doing.
I love that. I love that. Well, Wendy, I can't thank you enough for your time. This has been so enjoyable. I feel that this interview will give a lot of men and women an opportunity to think outside the box of a destructive divorce, and that parting well is so beneficial to the long term, to our own well-being, and to anyone that we interact with, our family, our friends, our children. It doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to be bad. So I just want to thank you so much. Do you have any parting words or anything like that?
No, I think you got it. I'm glad you're doing this. I think that it's like weddings, divorces keep happening, and people can use support.
We can get them on the front end and the back end,
And then the second marriage.
So thank you to the audience for taking the time to listen to this fantastic interview, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Rebuild with Confidence Divorce Summit. I appreciate your participation, and I'm proud of you for leaning in to your healing journey. If you're ready to take the next step towards rebuilding with confidence, book a discovery call with me at secondactcoaching.com. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and resources to help you start the rebuilding process and create a life you are excited about. Remember, you are not alone. We're here to support you every step of the way. Take care, my friend, and remember, there's always hope for a brighter future, and the best is yet to come.